Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere hot, really hot. You're standing in the middle of an ancient Persian courtyard, and the sun has decided it's your enemy. The air smells like warm stone and rose petals someone spilled too early this morning. The marble floor is practically steaming under your feet. Somewhere nearby, a palace cat is melting into the shade. This question mark, this is where you're going to learn how ice cream, real, edible coldness, was invented in the middle of a desert. You probably won't survive this kitchen shift without heat stroke. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging past the outer walls of Persepolis, 500 BCE. At this point in history, Persia is what you'd call a bit extra. Pillars taller than your apartment building, lion statues that may or may not come alive at dusk, and royal kitchens that produce more gossip than food. And here's where you meet him, Amir, a mid-level palace cook who thinks he can change the culinary world, not with fire, but with cold. It's laughable. Fire is everywhere here. Bread bakes in earth ovens, buried beneath the sand. Dates stew in copper pots until they turn into something that could bribe a god. But Amir? He stares at a bowl of rose water and crushed pistachios like they owe him something. He wants the impossible, dessert that cools the tongue. And not just any dessert. Something so startling, so absurd, that the court poets will choke on their rhymes. Now, historians still argue whether Amir actually existed or whether he was a convenient myth wrapped around a real invention. Some say he was a title, not a name. Amir, just meaning commander of the kitchen. Others claim he was a merchant's son who got exiled for misusing a date press. What we do know is that the Achaemenid court had something resembling sorbet centuries before Europe even figured out refrigeration. Amir's problem was simple. It's 43 degrees Celsius, and his pistachio paste is melting. The kitchens are a humid circus of clay ovens, fig-stuffed pastries, and flies that behave like they've paid rent. The palace cooks, all 32 of them, are ranked by how loudly their dishes sizzle. But Amir? He wants silence. He wants stillness. And most of all, he wants snow. Of course, that's insane. Snow is found in the distant Zagros Mountains, days away by caravan. It arrives when it arrives at all, packed in straw and prayer, reserved for the king's fever or religious ceremonies. It's not supposed to end up in someone's pudding. And yet, Amir gets an idea. What if, instead of waiting for snow, he convinces the icemen to work for him? You're going to meet those icemen soon. But for now, let's zoom in on his experiment. A clay bowl, deep enough to hold a prayer, and wide enough to disappoint a hungry man. He fills it with rose water and crushed dates, tosses in a few saffron strands, stolen from a spice jar labeled "Do Not Touch," and places it in the coolest spot he knows, beneath the courtyard's marble fountain, right where the shadow never moves. Spoiler, it doesn't freeze, not even close, but it chills, slightly, and that's enough for a madman like Amir. The next morning, he tastes it and shudders, not from cold, from hope. Out in the courtyard, a cat sneezes. A parrot mocks someone's cooking. Far above, carved into the stone lattice of the palace dome, is a verse no one can read anymore. But Amir? He's already rewriting dessert history, one barely chilled spoon at a time. Of course, no one cares. Yet, you wander past the other cooks, one of whom is arguing with a fish about being too fresh. There's a woman who bakes flatbread with curses, and a man who believes cinnamon came from dragons. He's only partly wrong. Ancient cinnamon myths are wild. In this kitchen, ambition is dangerous. Too much garlic? You're out. Too little cumin? You're explaining yourself to the vizier. So, Amir doesn't tell anyone. He hides his cold rosewater bowls behind jars of sheep yogurt and mystery pickles. Every evening, he slips into the shadows and tastes the progress. It's slow, maddening, but it's happening. There's something about the contrast, the desert heat outside, and that flicker of cold on his tongue that it makes him keep going. He starts writing recipes on bits of parchment. He begins dreaming of snow, and he gets very, very good at staying quiet. Historians disagree about how these cold dishes were technically made. Some argue it wasn't ice at all, but chilled syrup poured over cooled metal bowls. Others claim Persian kitchens used an early form of evaporation cooling, placing pots in porous jars soaked in water, then burying them in sand. Either way, the result was unlike anything the court had tasted. But Amir isn't ready to serve it. Not yet. Instead, he plans something much more ambitious. He's going to get real snow, and that means finding the men who haul it. Slowly, stubbornly, and against all logic, through the burning heart of Persia. You wake before dawn, long before the palace drums start their dull morning thump. The air is still cool enough to breathe without complaint, but just barely. Amir nudges you with a bowl of date mush, breakfast for the desperate, and tells you to keep up. Today, you're heading out with the Icemen. Now, these aren't your average traders. These are specialists, men with thick scarves, sun-creased faces, and the patience of tree bark. Their cargo? Ice. Real, crystalline snow ice, shaved and packed into insulated goatskin crates and stored in straw-lined terracotta barrels. No magic, just stubborn engineering. The ice comes from the Zagros Mountains, days away from Persepolis, by foot, or more often, by camel. And these camels are not glamorous desert ships. They're groaning, resentful beasts with expressions that say, I regret everything. Still, each one hauls several large canisters of compacted snow, sealed with date pitch and reed mats. It's a logistical nightmare, powered by salt, shade, and lots of loud arguing. Amir's plan is simple. Join the caravan, pay with a favor, and beg for a delivery that doesn't melt by the time it reaches the palace kitchens. So off you go. The caravan departs just before the sun breaches the horizon, its shadows stretching long and thin across the cracked stone roads. You pass date farms, salt merchants, and a boy trying to convince a goat to be reasonable. It's a quiet journey until you reach the Yakhchal. Ah, yes, this is where it gets impressive. A Yakhchal, literally ice pit, is a dome-shaped ancient Persian refrigerator that looks like a beehive made of desert dreams. Buried beneath it is a deep, subterranean chamber filled with winter ice, harvested or stored since the cold season. They work by combining evaporative cooling with thick insulating walls made of a special mud brick called saruj, a mix of clay, ash, lime, and sand that shrugs off heat like an annoyed lizard. You descend into the pit, and just like that, cold air kisses your cheeks. It smells like damp straw and something faintly metallic, like snow, remembering it once touched a sword. Inside, slabs of ice are stacked like sleepy giants. A man wearing 4 scarves grumbles something about ice theft. and hands Amir a cube the size of your head. You hold it in your lap on the return journey, watching it sweat into your robe. Historians still argue whether these early ice deliveries were regular events or limited to elite palaces and rituals. Some records suggest they were reserved for medicine, lowering fevers, treating inflammation, cooling burns. Others whisper about frozen dishes offered only during Nowruz, the Persian New Year. What's not debated? Moving ice across the desert was both absurd and impressive, a little like wearing fur to a beach party. Back at the palace, Amir sneaks the cargo in through the scullery tunnel. He's practically vibrating with glee. He carves the block with a bronze knife, collecting the slush in clay bowls, nestled in cool cloth. Then he adds it: rose water, a touch of honey, the smallest pinch of ground mint, and just a drop of fermented quince. Don't ask. It's complicated. And he tastes it. Cold, sweet, floral, slightly tangy. The spoon feels like winter in the middle of a sunburn. For a brief, hallucinatory moment, he forgets where he is. The heat, the pressure, the politics. He is a boy again, chasing shadows in the garden, tongue out for the last snowflake of spring. Then a kitchen servant walks in and screams because she thinks he's bleeding from the mouth. Turns out the saffron stains a little dramatically. The good news? She wants a taste. Amir, wide-eyed and still chewing, lets her. She gasps, then nods, then says something completely terrifying. You should let the king try this. Cue panic. You see, serving the king anything, not pre-approved by the chief of palace provisions, is a fast track to losing a finger, or two, or all your employment. But the servant's already halfway down the corridor, yelling something about cold fire and miracle dessert. Amir drops his spoon. Meanwhile, outside, a storm is stirring, not of sand or wind, but of attention, because that bowl of rosewater snow is about to change everything, even if it melts first. By the time you catch up with her, the servant is already halfway through the palace's inner courtyard, bowl in hand, eyes wild with enthusiasm and minor heat stroke. She's not exactly storming the throne room, but she is heading straight for the royal tasting chamber, which, unfortunately, is one decorative hallway away from certain doom. You manage to intercept her at the second fountain, nearly colliding with a gardener who's been pruning the same bush since breakfast. Amir catches his breath, mutters an apology to the gods of panic, and makes a decision that will haunt his future. Let her go. Because maybe the king will like it. Now you're probably wondering, what kind of king would eat a mysterious, unsolicited frozen dessert delivered by a sweating kitchen girl? The answer? A bored one. Darius the First, King of Kings, has already conquered half the known world and eaten all its best snacks. Most days, his meals arrive in a procession worthy of an opera: goat cheese from Bactria, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, well, Ceylon back then, and figs massaged into submission. The man has a leisurely tongue, so when a small bowl of suspiciously steaming rosewater mush appears on a silver tray, he doesn't flinch. He does, however, raise one eyebrow, the royal equivalent of shouting. The court taster, a sour man named Bahram, sniffs it first. He taps it. He even speaks to it. Then he takes a tiny bite and doesn't immediately die, which is encouraging. Only then does the bowl pass to the king. Everyone holds their breath. You stand behind a carved pillar, watching like it's the final round of a reality show. Amir grips your sleeve so hard you lose feeling in your arm. The king lifts the spoon, studies the glistening contents, then lets it melt on his tongue. A pause, another spoonful. Then a smirk. That's it. No speech, no dramatic pronouncement, just a little curl at the edge of a ruler's lip. But in palace kitchens, that's thunder. The next morning, Amir is summoned. Not to be executed, surprisingly, but to answer a single question. What season have you hidden in my spoon? You're standing beside him as he bows, lower than anyone in the room. Winter, my lord, he says, in exile. And just like that, Amir becomes the palace's unofficial commander of cold. He's still technically a cook, but now he's the cook who brought snow into summer. His reward? Access to the royal pantry and 3 more ice deliveries. But of course, fame has a scent, and it smells like jealousy. Other chefs start muttering, not just behind his back, but while he's still in the room. There's Chef Vahid, who thinks anything not roasted isn't real food, and Chef Taraneh, who once carved an entire goat into the shape of a pomegranate. It was horrifying. These people didn't rise through the greasy ranks just to be upstaged by some experimental rose ice enthusiast. One evening, you find a note tucked into a basket of mint leaves. Fire belongs in the kitchen. Snow belongs in the mountains. Choose wisely. Charming. Still, Amir doesn't stop. Instead, he experiments harder. He starts pairing his snow creations with unexpected things: sour cherry paste, salted cucumber slivers, a hint of basil that makes you feel like you've fallen into a perfume bottle. He even tries saffron smoke, waving hot coals over cold bowls so the scent fuses into the chill. Historians still argue whether these early Persian dishes were precursors to bastani sonati, a traditional frozen dessert that includes rosewater, pistachio, and elastic threads of orchid root. Some claim Amir's experiments paved the way. Others say, nah, it was probably 5 different people across a century, all yelling at each other in different dialects. But if you ask me, Amir's obsession with balancing heat and cold, that tension, is the soul of it. And just when you think things might calm down, they don't. One of the other chefs tries to sabotage Amir's latest creation by sprinkling pool biber, a chili so intense it makes grown men weep, into the snow bowl. The result? A frozen dish so spicy it triggers a hiccup fit in the vizier that lasts 3 hours. He claims it gave him divine visions. Amir, ever polite, says, yes, I meant to do that. From this moment on, the tension isn't just culinary, it's political. Because cold, in a desert kingdom, is no longer just refreshing, it's power. And Amir, he's not just making dessert anymore, he's making trouble. It's mid-morning, and the palace is sweating. Even the marble corridors feel tacky, and the ceiling fans, those glorious palm leaf contraptions, operated by very bored servants, are flapping with all the enthusiasm of a tired pigeon. You and Amir are in the back kitchens, facing what has now become his Cold War, an unofficial competition between him and the rest of the culinary court. But Amir's not just reacting, he's planning. Today, he unveils his most ambitious concept yet: ice stuffed with surprise. It begins with a mold, clay bowls shaped like small hills, each one carefully chilled using leftover mountain shards and wet linen wrappings. Into these molds, he layers something scandalous: crushed melon, lavender syrup, and a spoonful of roasted almond paste. It's a gamble, not because the flavors are strange, but because sweetness in such excess is considered an indulgence fit only for the king himself. Sharing it with lesser nobles could be seen as either generosity or treason, depending on who's in the mood. So why do it? Because Amir's had a dream, not a mystical one, just a stubborn one, that one day, frozen sweetness won't be limited to elite hands, that people on the streets of Susa and Persepolis will buy snow the same way they buy bread. You help him prep 20 bowls, then 30, then 50. Word spreads fast. The first to arrive are the court scribes, who always look half dead from ink fumes. Then come the princess's handmaidens, pretending they're there for spice inventory. Finally, 3 soldiers, fully armored, sweating like fountains, show up and toss silver coins into the kitchen ash jar. One of them yells, "Make it cold enough to hurt." The idea of dessert becoming revolutionary might seem ridiculous, but in a place where cold is a metaphor for power and control, and sweet is luxury incarnate, Amir's icy inventions start shifting the palace's mood. Whispers float through corridors. Some call it magic, some call it soft rebellion. Meanwhile, historians today are still baffled by the frozen banquet described in one cuneiform fragment, where dishes were said to sting like winter and bloom like gardens. Many believe it was an exaggeration. Others say Amir's early work fits the description too perfectly to ignore. One elderly priest calls Amir's creation culinary heresy. Naturally, he returns the next day for seconds. There's a weird tension growing. Not the violent kind, yet, but the type that makes the guards suspicious and the musicians play slightly faster. One day, you're summoned to a private garden courtyard where an older noblewoman named Lady Sitare waits with an unreadable expression. She's holding a cup of something steaming. "Hot vinegar tea," she says, sipping. "Very traditional. Very expected." Then she gestures to a boy servant holding one of Amir's bowls. He offers it. She tastes, and for the first time all morning, she smiles. "You're trying to reverse the seasons," she tells you. "You've turned the world upside down. I like that." And just like that, you have your first ally in the Queen Mother's circle. This might seem small, but in Persian court life, kitchens and corridors are connected by rumor, and rumor is architecture. A kind word in a tiled garden can reshape policy or destroy it. Amir, of course, celebrates this minor victory in the only way he knows how. By attempting something even dumber, he decides to build a portable freezer. Now don't get too excited. It's not electric, and there are no gears involved. It's basically a tightly sealed wooden box lined with sheep wool, wet clay, and bundles of charcoal ash. The idea is simple. Use passive insulation to keep snowballs cold during transport across palace grounds, or better, into the city beyond. The prototype is ugly. It smells like damp farm. But after several nights of testing and 2 alarming fire incidents, never place it next to the lamp oil. The device works. Mostly. You can move a chilled bowl from kitchen to stable yard and only lose about 10% of the frost, which is just enough to get noticed by a curious young engineer named Farzan, who works on aqueduct pressure systems. He offers to help Amir refine the design, and now, suddenly, this little ice dream has momentum. Historians still argue whether these early cooling devices influenced later Chinese or Indian refrigeration experiments, or whether they were one of those parallel inventions happening all over the world without each other's knowledge. But this much is clear. Amir's project stopped being a kitchen stunt and started becoming an infrastructure problem. More bowls, more boxes, more buzz. And the palace? It's starting to split. Because in the north courtyard, Chef Taraneh is holding roasted grape trials for a new festival meal. But no one's attending. They're all in the back garden, licking saffron snow off carved pomegranate spoons. Terrane's glare could melt glaciers. So when Amir returns to his quarters that night and finds a pile of crushed ice and sandalwood ash dumped at his door, you both know what it means. The palace war has officially gone cold. The next morning begins in eerie quiet. No bell chimes, no spice seller's whistle, just the low, hissing wind curling over palace roofs, like it's whispering secrets too old for language. You step into the courtyard and find Amir already up, sleeves rolled, staring into one of his ice boxes like it might answer for all his problems. We're missing 4 deliveries, he says, without turning. You frown. That's half the usual ice. You run the numbers, quick mental math, not your strength before breakfast, and realize that without the full ice quota, you won't even make the royal lunch rounds. That means no sweet bowls, no soft sorbet trials, no jasmine slush experiments, just a whole lot of lukewarm nothing. Sabotage? Maybe. But Amir's not throwing plates or pacing furiously. He just whispers, "Time for Plan B." And Plan B, as it turns out, is completely unhinged. You spend the next hour lugging jugs of water into the courtyard, pouring them into shallow ceramic trays that Amir spreads across shaded marble tiles. Radiative cooling, he explains, as if you're supposed to be impressed. If the night's dry and the air is still, the heat leaves the water and skips into the sky. You blink. The water cools itself? More or less. Now, you may have never heard of this concept. Many haven't. But it's real. Ancient Persians used it in special ice pits or Yakhchals, funneling the frigid desert nights into slow, deliberate frost. Historians still debate whether these structures were more spiritual than practical, symbols of man's dominion over nature. Amir? He just wants his frozen melon cubes. So that night, you and Amir become moonlit scientists. You creep across roof tiles, shielding trays from breeze. You place cotton drapes over each tray to slow evaporation. You hum to yourself to stay awake. Amir mutters theories under his breath. It's a mix between alchemy and sleep deprivation. At dawn, you find frost. Not much. A whisper of ice on the shallow trays. But it's enough. You scrape it like treasure, transfer it to the box, and carry it like you're holding the last breath of winter. It chills one single dessert bowl. You serve it to Lady Sitara yourself. And she weeps, not dramatically, just a quiet, dignified eye gloss and a smile that hints at youth remembered. It tastes like prayer, she says, then eats the whole thing. By midday, the palace buzzes, not about sabotage, not about the royal tax scandal, but about how the frost returned without the mountain snowmen. Rumors swell, whispers that Amir has harnessed the moon, frozen the wind, tamed the gods. He leans over and whispers, "All I did was leave water outside." But the legend has already moved faster than the facts. The opposition, led now by Chef Vahid, the roast overlord, grows bolder. He claims Amir is using forbidden salts, perhaps even magic herbs. He starts petitioning the Royal Food Commission to investigate suspicious refrigeration practices. The vizier, chewing on an almond-stuffed date, raises an eyebrow and says, "We're investigating cold now? What's next? A conspiracy of breezes?" But to play it safe, Amir's told to submit his methods in writing, which is a problem, because Amir doesn't write. He cooks, he smells and stirs, and burns things until they surrender. But he doesn't chart temperatures or scribble formulas. That's your job now. So you sit down, quill in hand, and start the first known Persian recipe journal for frozen confections. And let me tell you, it's glorious. You label entries like Ard 12. Apricot shards? Oui. Smoke sugar mist. 17. Mint melt. Regrets edition? Too salty. 21. Victory saffron surprise. Made vizier hiccup. Again. This journal becomes your shared diary, your lab record, your secret survival manual. You draw tiny diagrams of frost layers. You debate what shape captures the ideal mouth cold. You name a flavor after Farzine, who manages to improve the icebox insulation using goat bladder lining. Disgusting. Yes. Effective? Also yes. Meanwhile, historians today still marvel at fragments found near Yazd. Brittle sheets of clay marked with dessert symbols and frieze diagrams. Some think they were prayers, others think they were inventory, but a few believe they were Amir's first attempts to codify his art. Yours, really. You and Amir, accidental engineers of joy. But back then, you're just trying to survive long enough to finish Plan C. Because yes, there's a Plan C. And it involves leaving the palace walls. The city beyond the palace walls is an entirely different beast. You trudge through bustling bazaars, scented with saffron, smoke, and the sharp tang of fresh pomegranates. Merchants shout prices you don't understand, and children dart past your ankles like mischievous sand sprites. This isn't the calm marble palace. It's a living, breathing mosaic of noise and color. Amir's idea: to spread the frozen delight beyond royal confines, to test whether common folk can handle cold sweetness without losing their minds or getting frostbite. You find a shady corner near the public bathhouse, where the humidity clashes with the dry desert air. Amir sets up a small stand, a wooden table draped with faded cloth, bowls of ice nestled in clay pots filled with ash. It looks humble, but the impact is anything but. The first customer is an old woman named Mina, whose fingers are gnarled from years of weaving silk. She eyes the frozen concoction suspiciously, but takes a spoonful after Amir's insistence. Her eyes widen, and she nods slowly, as if savoring a forgotten childhood memory. Word spreads fast. Soon, neighbors line up, clutching coins, eager for a taste of this strange cold treat that defies the desert sun. Some locals joke it's the devil's snow, while others swear it's a blessing from the mountain spirits. The children are unanimous. It's magic. Amir watches, a flicker of pride flickering behind his usual calm demeanor. You notice his hands tremble slightly, not from the heat, but from the sheer audacity of this dream. Historians still debate whether early Persian vendors of frozen treats had an organized trade or were more like itinerant performers, popping up with bowls of cold joy and disappearing into the night. Some ancient scripts hint at snow cellars in nearby regions, but concrete proof is elusive. That night, back at the palace, Amir receives a sealed message. It's from Lady Sitare, expressing cautious support, but warning of growing resentment among palace elites. The cold rebellion is gaining momentum, not with swords or banners, but with spoons and smiles. You and Amir exchange a glance. Both of you know that the path ahead will be frostbitten and fraught. But for now, the city tastes winter's kiss. Days slip by like drifting clouds, but the palace's chill war heats up. Chef Fahid, feeling the sting of his diminished influence, escalates his campaign. He stages a theatrical demonstration in the Great Hall, proclaiming that Amir's frozen delights are unnatural and against the will of the sun god. A small crowd gathers, some intrigued, others skeptical. You watch from the sidelines as Vahid dramatically melts a bowl of ice with a brazier flame, declaring, "See how the sun consumes this sorcery? Let the frost be banished. His voice booms, but the effect feels more like an angry child throwing a tantrum than a serious argument. Amir, unfazed, responds quietly by inviting the court's physicians to examine the ingredients. The physicians, always keen to assert their importance, declare the concoctions safe, even beneficial in moderation, citing ancient Persian practices of cooling the body to combat desert heat. This medical endorsement shifts public opinion subtly. People start associating Amir's creations with wellness, not just indulgence. Amir's ice bowls become not only a treat, but a remedy. Historians note that this association between food and medicine was common in ancient Persia, where culinary art often intertwined with healing rituals. Yet, they still debate whether Amir intended his ice creams to serve a medical purpose or if it was an opportunistic branding move. Meanwhile, you notice Amir experimenting with new flavors inspired by Persian gardens, rosewater, pomegranate molasses, and even a hint of wild saffron. Each bowl becomes a fragrant journey, a cooling oasis amidst the desert's harshness. One evening, while savoring a particularly delicate scoop, Amir confides that the real challenge isn't making ice, but preserving its magic, the wonder it sparks in people's hearts. As you nod, a sudden commotion breaks out in the courtyard. Word has arrived that a group of merchants from distant lands are interested in this frozen marvel. They speak of silk routes and trade caravans eager to carry Amir's ice far beyond Persia. This news electrifies the palace. The idea of sharing cold sweetness with the wider world feels both exhilarating and daunting. Historians still puzzle over the extent of ancient Persian influence on frozen desserts in China and India, with some suggesting these merchants played a crucial role in spreading the recipe and technology. Amir's dream is growing, and with it, the whispers of a sweet revolution. One spoonful at a time, days slip by like drifting clouds, but the palace's chill war heats up. Chef Vahid, feeling the sting of his diminished influence, escalates his campaign. He stages a theatrical demonstration in the Great Hall, proclaiming that Amir's frozen delights are unnatural and against the will of the sun god. A small crowd gathers, some intrigued, others skeptical. You watch from the sidelines as Vahid dramatically melts a bowl of ice with a brazier flame, declaring, "See how the sun consumes this sorcery. Let the frost be banished." His voice booms, but the effect feels more like an angry child throwing a tantrum than a serious argument. Amir, unfazed, responds quietly by inviting the court's physicians to examine the ingredients. The physicians, always keen to assert their importance, declare the concoctions safe, even beneficial in moderation, citing ancient Persian practices of cooling the body to combat desert heat. This medical endorsement shifts public opinion subtly. People start associating Amir's creations with wellness, not just indulgence. Amir's ice bowls become not only a treat, but a remedy. Historians note that this association between food and medicine was common in ancient Persia, where culinary art often intertwined with healing rituals. Yet, they still debate whether Amir intended his ice creams to serve a medical purpose or if it was an opportunistic branding move. Meanwhile, you notice Amir experimenting with new flavors inspired by Persian gardens, rosewater, pomegranate molasses, and even a hint of wild saffron. Each bowl becomes a fragrant journey, a cooling oasis amidst the desert's harshness. One evening, while savoring a particularly delicate scoop, Amir confides that the real challenge isn't making ice, but preserving its magic, the wonder it sparks in people's hearts. As you nod, a sudden commotion breaks out in the courtyard. Word has arrived that a group of merchants from distant lands are interested in this frozen marvel. They speak of silk routes and trade caravans eager to carry Amir's ice far beyond Persia. This news electrifies the palace. The idea of sharing cold sweetness with the wider world feels both exhilarating and daunting. Historians still puzzle over the extent of ancient Persian influence on frozen desserts in China and India, with some suggesting these merchants played a crucial role in spreading the recipe and technology. Amir's dream is growing, and with it, the whispers of a sweet revolution, one spoonful at a time. The following weeks pass in a whirl of experiments, negotiations, and whispered rumors. Amir's frozen delights become the talk of the town, and not just within palace walls. The common market buzzes with tales of the mysterious cold fruit that melts on your tongue like a dream. You spend your days helping Amir refine the recipes, adding unexpected twists, a sprinkle of crushed pistachios here, a dash of cardamom there. Each flavor tells a story, a secret from Persian gardens and ancient texts. One afternoon, while you're both hunched over a new batch, a curious sight catches your eye. A group of palace guards exchanging furtive glances, their expressions a mix of suspicion and awe. It turns out that Amir's ice cream has attracted more than just admirers. The royal guard is split, some eager to protect this new wonder, others wary of its disruptive potential. You overhear a heated debate about whether the ice cream is a harmless indulgence or a dangerous distraction from more serious matters, like palace politics and tax collection. Historians still argue whether frozen treats ever played a role in social unrest or if this was just palace paranoia. But it's clear that Amir's invention stirs more than just taste buds. Meanwhile, you notice Amir's growing fatigue, the relentless pace, the politics, the pressure. It weighs on him like a heavy cloak. One night, as you pack up the last trays, Amir admits quietly that sometimes he dreams of a simpler life, where ice cream is just a joy, not a battleground. You smile and remind him even the coldest stone starts as a pebble. In that moment, you realize this is more than a dessert. It's a spark, small but potent, that might one day change everything. The next challenge arrives unexpectedly. A brutal summer heat wave sweeps through the city, pushing the desert's warmth beyond anything you've seen. The palace feels like an oven, and even the marble floors seem to sweat. Ice, your precious commodity, becomes more elusive than ever. Amir watches the shrinking ice supply with a furrowed brow. The caravans from the Zagros Mountains are delayed, trapped by sandstorms and unpredictable politics along the trade routes. You both know this delay could spell disaster, not just for the ice cream, but for the fragile trust built with the court and the people. Determined, Amir turns his attention back to ancient cooling techniques. He recalls stories of desert nomads who used underground tunnels and evaporative cooling to survive extreme temperatures. Inspired, you help him construct a small prototype, Yakhchal, a dome-shaped ice house outside the city walls, designed to capture and store the scarce cold. This method involves layering thick mud bricks, utilizing nighttime radiative cooling, and insulating with straw. It's painstaking work, done under the unrelenting sun. You both joke that you're building a desert refrigerator, though neither of you can guarantee it will work. Historians debate whether the Yakhchal was a royal invention or folk ingenuity, but here, under your hands, it feels like hope, solidified. Weeks pass, and the Yakhchal's interior temperature drops enough to preserve small blocks of ice. Amir gleefully harvests the first batch, calling it liquid gold. Meanwhile, whispers of your efforts reach even the most skeptical palace factions. Chef Vahid's opposition softens when he tastes a scoop cooled by the new ice house, his usual scowl replaced by a grudging nod. Still, you're both aware the battle for cold survival has only just begun. And somewhere, in the silence of the desert night, you feel the distant rumble of change, one that will carry Amir's frozen dream far beyond the palace gates. Word of the Yakhchal spreads quickly, inspiring curiosity and skepticism alike. You walk through the city streets and overhear merchants whispering about this miraculous ice house, some calling it sorcery, others praising it as a triumph of Persian ingenuity. At the palace, the ice house becomes a symbol of resilience. Amir hosts small gatherings where he shares not only frozen treats, but stories of the desert's hidden secrets, tales of ancient engineering, forgotten sciences, and the harmony between human need and nature's extremes. You marvel at the way his words cool the room almost as effectively as the ice itself, weaving history and humor into a soothing tapestry that eases palace tensions. But there's still a lingering question that gnaws at you. How did the idea of frozen desserts spread beyond Persia's borders? Jahan, the trader, returns with news that ice and snow had long been cherished luxuries in other cultures. China's snow wine, India's sharbat, and the Roman snow houses built by emperors. Amir's innovation, it seems, fits into a larger mosaic of human creativity, each culture adding its own flavor. Historians continue to debate whether Persia's frozen desserts directly influenced these traditions or developed in parallel, a testament to human imagination confronting nature's challenges. In one of your quiet conversations, Amir muses that perhaps the true magic lies not in the ice itself, but in the shared experience of enjoying something rare and beautiful. You agree, realizing that the journey of this frozen treat is also a journey of connection, crossing deserts, empires, and centuries. As night falls, you both savor a final scoop beneath a sky full of stars, each bite a quiet celebration of endurance, invention, and the simple joy of cold sweetness in a hot world. With the success of the Yakhchal, Amir's frozen treat begins to spread beyond palace walls. Merchants traveling the Silk Road catch wind of this icy marvel, whispering about the cold that defies the desert. Soon, traders from far flung cities like Samarkand and Baghdad are eager to sample and perhaps replicate the treat. You find yourself accompanying Amir to a bustling market, the scent of cardamom and roasted lamb heavy in the air. The noise is a cacophony of bargaining, laughter, and the occasional clatter of pottery. Amir sets up a modest stall, offering small portions of his chilled concoction. The curious crowd hesitates at first. Cold desserts in a place where ice is sacred, rare, and expensive. It feels like a paradox. But with the first hesitant tastes, smiles bloom. Children giggle as the cold bites their tongues. Elders nod approvingly, recalling similar but less refined desserts from their youth. You watch Amir, pride glowing in his eyes, as his creation finds a place in everyday life. Historians still debate whether Persia's frozen desserts influenced later European sorbets, or if they evolved independently. Some point to trade records suggesting that Persian recipes traveled west, while others believe similar innovations arose from parallel needs. Amir's success is not without challenges. The ice supply remains limited, and the labor intensive methods restrict how far his frozen dream can travel. You joke that ice was the original rare ingredient, even before saffron or exotic spices. Back at the palace, whispers of jealousy swirl among other cooks, especially Chef Vahid. He grumbles that the ice cream craze distracts from more serious, royal dishes, but even he cannot deny the delight it brings. One evening, you and Amir share a quiet moment beneath the stars, savoring a scoop. The desert wind is cool, carrying scents of jasmine and the distant fires. Amir muses that perhaps the true power of his invention isn't just the cold, but how it brings warmth to people's hearts. You nod, realizing this story is far from over. It's only just beginning. By now, Amir's frozen dessert has become something of a legend, whispered in bazaars and recounted in palace halls. You walk through the streets of Persepolis, noticing how the city's rhythm seems to pulse a little differently, lighter, cooler, even if only in spirit. People carry small bowls with remnants of Amir's creation, and children mimic the slurping sounds, as if that alone could summon cold. Amir, however, isn't content resting on his laurels. He's obsessed with perfecting the recipe, experimenting with new ingredients brought in from distant lands, rose petals from Kashmir, wild honey from the Zagros foothills, and even rare spices rumored to come from the islands beyond the Persian Gulf. Your role in the kitchen has grown too. You've become the silent apprentice, the ever watchful taster, and the occasional prankster who once swapped saffron for marigold petals. Don't worry, no one noticed. The atmosphere in the kitchen is a strange mix of reverence and mischief, much like the city itself. Meanwhile, Chef Vahid's grudging acceptance shifts into a strange kind of admiration. He starts sneaking bites of Amir's chilled creation when no one's looking, claiming it reminds him of the cold winters in the north. You smirk, suspecting the truth is that the dessert simply helps with the summer's unbearable heat. Historians continue to debate if Amir's recipe inspired the later European gelato, or if it was a separate culinary evolution altogether. Some scholars argue Persia was a crucial crossroads where ideas and ice melted boundaries. One night, as the moon casts silver light on the courtyard, Amir confides a secret. His inspiration wasn't just about ice or flavor, but about creating moments of joy and respite in a harsh world. Moments like this, you realize, are the real treasures. You take a slow sip of chilled rosewater syrup, savoring the bittersweetness, and nod in agreement. The story of cold in the desert is a story about warmth, the warmth of human creativity, patience, and hope. As Amir's frozen treat gains fame, whispers of it reach distant courts and travelers from lands you've only heard of. India's lush river valleys, Egypt's sun-drenched Nile, and the islands of the Aegean Sea. You imagine caravans carrying not just silk and spices, but stories of a dessert that turns desert heat into a refreshing promise. The Yakhchal keepers continue their night journeys, their dedication almost mythical now. You follow one caravan for a night, feeling the cool desert breeze brush against your skin, while the ice blocks, wrapped in insulating straw, make their slow pilgrimage. You wonder if the icemen ever consider the irony, risking everything to deliver cold to a place that seems designed to melt it away. At the palace, Amir experiments with freezing techniques, sometimes using evaporative cooling methods, wetting porous clay pots, and placing them in the sand overnight to cool their contents. You chuckle at his jokes about ancient refrigerators while you watch him scribble notes by candlelight. There's a curious moment when a visiting scholar from far off Alexandria questions if Amir's frozen concoctions could ever be replicated in cooler climates, or if the desert heat is essential to their magic. You ponder this while sipping your own bowl of chilled dessert, realizing that sometimes adversity breeds the most remarkable inventions. Historians argue whether Amir's innovation was a singular event or part of a larger pattern of desert civilizations mastering the art of cold. Some think the Yakhchal itself was the real breakthrough, a marvel of engineering that preserved ice through summer without electricity. One evening, as you share a quiet laugh with Amir over a batch of slightly too salty rosewater syrup, you realize that this frozen treat is more than dessert. It's a story of persistence, community, and unexpected joy. You watch the stars fade into dawn, the desert cooling, and smile. The ice will melt, but the story? That's forever. Time flows, and the legacy of Amir's cold creation settles into the fabric of Persian life. You stroll through the palace gardens, where fragrant jasmine mingles with the soft crunch of marble beneath your feet. The once radical dessert is now a cherished treat, enjoyed during royal feasts and humble street gatherings alike. Amir, now older, watches from the shadows as his invention weaves itself into the culture. He's no longer the reckless dreamer, but the quiet craftsman whose patience turned ice into art. You can almost hear the palace walls whispering tales of frozen rosewater and saffron, of icemen trekking deserts, and of a cook who dared to dream cold in a land of heat. Historians still debate the exact recipe and methods, but they agree on the impact. Amir's innovation bridged the impossible, turning a desert's greatest enemy, heat, into a source of comfort and delight. It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest pebble in the heart can ripple into something much greater. As you reflect, you realize this story isn't just about ice cream. It's about creativity, carving space for wonder in the harshest places, about how humans find joy where it seems unlikely. Now, as you close your eyes, feel the coolness linger on your tongue and the desert breeze fade to a whisper. Let Amir's story settle softly around you like a gentle snowflake, brief, beautiful, and quietly miraculous. Sleep well, friend. Wind down. Slowly, the desert night wraps itself around you, soft and endless. The warmth of the day dissolves into a gentle coolness that whispers peace. You feel the echoes of ancient footsteps, the faint scent of rosewater on the breeze, and the promise of icy sweetness carried through time. Let these quiet moments soothe your mind as your breath deepens and your body unwinds. The story lingers like a comforting shadow, a pebble resting lightly in your heart. Now, drift gently toward rest, knowing the world holds its wonders just beneath the surface, waiting patiently to be discovered again. Sweet dreams.